Okay, let's give this one a go. Making a little adjustment here. And let's see, I'm in a new room now, and it's a much brighter room. So we'll see if you can see the whiteboard a little better. And what more perfect time to introduce polynomials than now. Here we go. I'm taking my time doing this right now because I'd like you to see all these vocabulary words I wrote on the board. I'll address each one as we go along. The topic is polynomials, and some polynomials we call monomials, some we call binomials, and some we call trinomials. We'll get to that in a second. The overall theme that you should understand as we go along, which really is beginning of high school math, is the math of unlike terms. And we're already familiar with that from middle school, so I'm going to just pause here a second and give you some examples here. For example, x plus 1 is called linear, right? And the x can never go together with the 1. And we'll end up calling this a binomial. I'll get that to that in a second. And how about radical 2 plus 1? These can never be put together either. Okay? And here we go, moving ahead, maybe anticipating what we haven't done yet. How about x squared plus 1? Or x squared plus x. And so these are unlike terms that can't be combined, as you learned in 7th grade, and you'll relearn again if you've forgotten how to do that. So the math is all about putting these together. We have to add them, subtract them, which is really 7th grade math. Excuse me. And then we're going to have to multiply them, divide them, take their square roots occasionally, and square them, even cube them. So we're going to sort of treat these guys just like they were numbers, but they're a new kind of number, right? And so that's why I'm going to call it the math of unlike terms, okay? And remember, I'll use X principally, but the Regents book has no hesitation using A, B, C, D. They use Z. They use lots of letters, and so we'll get used to that as well because we'll do mostly their problems as we go along. So before we get started, keep this word in your mind, a term. We'll talk a lot about that. Degree we'll talk about in a couple seconds. Standard form, you've heard that word before. Well, each kind of the math that we do has a kind of a standard form. And then there's coefficient, something that you're used to. So I also mentioned here, because I don't want to forget any of these super important ideas, in our game that we're playing, in this game of polynomials, you're not allowed to have negative powers. That's going to come up, and I'm going to test your understanding of that as we go along. So we agree amongst ourselves, just like when you play Monopoly, you agree that you can't roll a 13, right, on the die. We agree that there are no negative powers, and I'll talk about that in a couple seconds. So I'll erase this stuff right over here. Excuse me for getting in the way. And I'll erase the unlike term part. Okay? And just mentioning, as we say, the big picture, to make sure that you're good with the big picture. Here we are. I like to put my ideas up first when I'm explaining something new, so you guys can get the big picture. So polynomial. All right, I'm going to write one out now. Since there are infinite number of polynomials, as many as the human brain can imagine, I'll just write one out just to make something out. How about this? 4x to the 6th power plus 3x to the 3rd power minus 2x squared plus 3. So let's explain this. The terms. The terms are the parts of the polynomial that can't be combined. They're unlike terms, as you learned in 7th grade. So this has 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Okay? If you're 4 or more terms, the word they give it in the textbooks is polynomial. Okay? Poly from the ancient Greek means many, and nomial is term. Okay? So this is 4 terms We call it a polynomial, and it's degree 6. And the degree is the highest power of a polynomial. Okay? So in this case, this is 4x to the 6th power, and the 6 defines the polynomial. And that is, the highest power is called the degree of the polynomial. Okay? And I'm going to write another polynomial underneath, and I'll do minus 5x to the 5th plus 4x to the 7th plus 6x to the 5th. And I'll ask you a couple simple questions. What's the degree of this? And how many terms are there? And if you answer, you can think about it for a second. We'll give you questions like this, including on a test. If you think about it, there are only 2 terms here. Okay? Why? Because this combines with this. Why do they combine? They're like terms. They share the same power. So then you use your n's and p's, your negatives and positives, and you write negative 5 plus 6 is 1x to the 5th plus 4x to the 7th, and this is going to be called a binomial, that is 2 terms to the 7th degree. But this is still written incorrectly because this binomial, as I'll explain in a second, has to be written in what we call standard form. So standard form says that when you write a polynomial correctly, you always start with the highest power, like I said, which is called a degree. Okay? So written properly, this is 4x to the 7th plus 1x to the 5th. By the way, in the textbooks, they'll never write the 1. Keep that in the back of your mind. But you're familiar with that from 8th grade algebra. And so this would be a polynomial to the 7th degree. And more specifically, it's a binomial. So binomial obviously means 2 terms. A monomial is 1 term. And a trinomial, which becomes a really important word later, becomes 3 terms. So when I wrote this out, the top one here, I wrote it in standard form. If you thought that the second one, when I initially wrote it out, has 3 terms, you're wrong, because like terms must be combined. And when I combine them, I wrote it in the wrong order, because when you write something in standard form, you always go from the highest degree to the lowest degree. So let's erase this for a second. And here I need the stronger stuff here. I'll have to work on that part here. And we're erasing this. Doesn't erase too easily. We'll work on these little details. Look at this. It just sort of doesn't erase right now. I'll work on that. I'll get that fixed up. We'll still continue the lesson. It's okay. And now we move on to the next topic. And what were the coefficients? Well, let me go over to this part of the board, because I'll fix that up later and we'll be able to erase things. And on this board, I'm going to write out something here. Let's do 3x to the 4th plus x to the 2nd plus 3. And we're going to fix this up. This is all the terms are different. You say, well, where's the x here? That's x to the 0. Oh, you learned that in 8th grade. Remember, any number or any variable to the 0 power is 1. So this is just saying 3, 1. It's got 3 times 1. This is a trinomial. It's a trinomial to the 4th degree. None of these guys can be combined. So we say in math that this is a trinomial, as I'm repeating myself, to the 3rd degree. So a lot of kids ask, and it's a good question, they say, well, what happened to x to the 3rd power? Aren't we supposed to go in order? And if you were really, really picky, you could write it that way, writing 3x to the 4th. And I'm going to pause a second. Does anybody want to tell me? Too bad we're not in class. It'd be a perfect question to ask the class. What goes here? Oh, that makes sense. 0 times x to the third power plus 1x squared plus 3x to the 0 power. Now we never write this. And we never write this. And of course we never write this, but this is really what's going on. It's worth thinking about what I just said. This is exactly what's going on in the math. Okay? So there we go. We don't count a term that has a 0 coefficient. So this, again, is a trinomial to the 4th degree. And the things that are going to be very important to us, of course, are the monomials, the binomials, and the trinomials. Okay? So we talked about all the terms here. Let's go over to this side. Like I said, we got a little issue with the board here. I'll work on fixing that up. And I'm going to write something else out. And I write 3x to the 8th. By the way, the powers can go as high as you want them. As the powers get bigger, the math gets less interesting and totally meaningless for a 9th grader. But just in theory, you could go as high as you want. And all of these have graphs associated with them. We won't talk about that now. And then I have plus 4x to the 3rd minus 2x squared plus 1 over x. So I'd ask you, what degree is this polynomial, how many terms that it has? And your answer should be immediate. This is not a polynomial. Why is it not a polynomial? We do not allow, in this game, negative powers, because this is really, as you learned in 8th grade, x to the negative 1. That is, you can go down to 0, x to the 0, but you can't go any lower in this game. Why? I don't know. Why can't you roll a 13 on the dice in Monopoly? Why don't they have 3 dice? Why don't they have 4 dice? That's the way math works. It's just a game that you're playing here. So there you go. I think we covered the basic ideas. I'd like to give you some exercises. And remember one more time, a monomial has 1 term, a binomial has 2 terms, and a trinomial has 3 terms. So let's just do a little check for understanding here. Here's 2x to the negative 2x to the 7th plus 4x to the 4th minus 2x to the 7th plus x. So they would ask you on the regions, please define this polynomial. Well, these guys combine, so that becomes minus 4x to the 7th. There's no 4x to the 4th. There's no x to the 4th. There's no x to the 5th. That means their coefficients are 0. And the next term that's left over is 4x to the 4th. And finally, x. And of course, we write x to the 1st. Again, you learned that when we did our work on exponents. So this is called, you might be calling it out if you're paying attention in the video, this is called a trinomial degree 7. And it's really important that you play this back if you didn't understand anything, because failure to understand these basic ideas, it becomes a total disaster for you as I move along. And some of you might think, oh wow, this stuff is mad easy. You're right, but it gets more difficult mad quick, okay? So I'm going to turn this off, and I'll dedicate a little time this morning trying to figure out what's going on with the blackboard or the whiteboard here, okay?